because the end goal, drum roll please, for all future entrepreneurs, your end goal is to get you out of the business entirely. You will never sell or exit your company with success if the company's dependent on you.
Startups with Stu is a podcast for anyone living or wanting to live the startup life, either as a founder or a team member. Your host, Stuart Draper, was a 9-time Inc. 5000 honoree before age 40. This show dives deep into the exhilarating world of entrepreneurship with guests that are seeking advice from Stu for their startup or business owners that want to share their entrepreneurial journey. Listeners always walk away with actionable ideas of what to do to take their startup to the moon. Startup life can feel like a roller coaster ride. And with Startups with Stu, you're likely to turn your roller coaster ride into a rocket ship ride. Get ready to uncover the secrets to startup success from visionary founders and savvy investors who've transformed groundbreaking ideas into thriving ventures.
Sharon Soliday, the speech pathologist turned entrepreneur. So glad to have you with us today. Thank you for being with us to help other entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited. I'm excited to be able to share with your audience.
So how does that happen? How do you go from speech pathology into entrepreneurship?
Well, you actually start as an entrepreneur, which I discovered about the time, maybe middle school, but then you finish school and you go to college and you want a specific career. And I had been exposed to speech pathology. It was in my family. We needed those services and I helped take a younger brother. And then I became licensed, certified, did it for 10 years as an employee for someone else. And by that point, I was like, I can no longer take it. I know a better way to do this and a better way to treat people. And so I started my own company. And it coincided nicely with my daughter was starting school. And I thought, how am I supposed to be at someone else's desk at 8:40 and drop my kid off at 8 o'clock? That's not going to work. So my husband worked full time and I said, I'm going to contract my services into a different school district to work around her hours in school. And it was wacky, but there was big demand. And so most people would say, that's great, I have a job. But as an entrepreneur, you see opportunity and your eyes sparkle like Christmas. And I thought, this is great. I could hire some of my friends and maybe get a small little company going. And then from there, we just started to grow intentionally over time. And I had the company 17 years before I sold it.
Okay, so it was a staffing business, a service-based business, you would call it, right?
Absolutely. It was a service-based business based on pediatric rehab specialists, PT, OT, psychologists, and then speech pathologists. That was sort of our bread and butter, those rehab specialists. And then we ended up also having a clinic that we operated within that practice. So lots of different fingers that all fell under the same umbrella.
So at the max, you've got 100 people working for you. And I'm asking myself, how do you keep in a service-based business the quality? Like, were there things that you all agreed, like as speech pathologists, we all like subscribe to this method? Like, how do you provide uniform service when it seems like there's a lot of different ways that people
and absolutely. And we were working across 6 states at the time of our sale, and our folks lived all over the place. So I really believe that if you give people sort of a guiding metric of you're never going to get in trouble with your boss if you make a decision based on one of our core values. And so we had 5 core values that we operated from. And we understood the clinical practices are going to be different based on everybody you serve. But we continually just said, the company's going to follow those same 5 values too. And when I made a decision about anything, or my leadership team made a decision, we said it's based on this value and here's how we decided. And sometimes people would come to us and they'd say, well, I'm kind of stuck. I have the situation. And we would say, well, what decision would you make if you were not talking to us and just looking at the values? And they would say, I would do X. And I said, well, then do it. And that also helped. It helped the quality of our services. It built a lot of rapport and trust with staff. And it also helped keep my leadership team pretty lean. I mean, when I think about, we had 100 plus employees, we had probably 9 people that were running that. And we were a multi-million-dollar company. So, and it's important, because a service company is hard in that most people, employers are thinking, well, these people could leave me in a minute and take every knowledge I've given them and go start their own company. Right. And so I was aware of that. And I thought, well, we just have to create a bunker where we're all in this together. You may work for me, but I really also work for you. And I'm here to lift you up and to know what you need. And that's why we try to do the right thing, I like to say, as a company. When I could have made more money if I paid slightly less or offered fewer benefits or, really just looked at the bottom dollar. But, that's not who I was. That wasn't in our values.
Yeah. So many little lessons can come from everything you just talked about. One that stands out to me is you mentioned that you could have made more money. Your business model was you go to the school district and you provide the pathologist, and you're saying, let's give some easy numbers, right?
Sure.
I'm gonna charge $100 to the district, and I'm going to pay the pathologist, say $70, and your markup's the 30%, right?
Right.
Was that kind of how your service-based business worked?
Yes, absolutely. And at the most basic level, we provided a service at higher dollar we charged than what we paid for professional. And the goal was to still make it a lucrative compensation for the professional so that they wanted to stay with you. Mm-hmm. And also you wanted the difference where you could make some money and also pay your leadership team to implement things. And I was very honest with my staff all along. I would put out in newsletters internally, like, here are expenses you don't hear us talk about, because I know in their minds, they're thinking, well, damn, she's making, I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't have sworn, but, she's making 30% of all this time I'm putting in. But I also like to say, and here on the backside of the business, here's what I'm paying to keep us moving forward. So that was helpful. That transparency makes a difference. People talk a lot, or at least they were talking a lot at one point about open books, and that, we're going to be transparent with employees. And I don't think you can be transparent with your books 100% because there's so many nuanced things that they just may not understand from a business perspective. And you would need a session to go through all that in your decision making. But I did think there was great value to say, kind of, this is what we have to pay in different places that you may not be aware of.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's good to give some perspective to your team in that regard. Another lesson I learned from your little story you just shared was you talked about how important it was to have values. Joseph Smith, the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he once said, I teach them correct principles and I let them govern themselves. And so if you have these values, this set of 5 values, and you say, this is what we live by, then the people get to go and choose if they're going to do whatever they want to do, as long as they hold the values, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you have to, and they need to be action-oriented values. They can't be just a noun, or an adjective. You have to have some, like we always said, you have to provide quality, put kids first. These were the types of language that we were using. So in their minds, could I professionally disagree with clinical treatment they used based on providing quality as a value? Yeah, we can disagree with that. But that is just a clinical perspective. Regardless of where we worked, I could disagree with somebody's clinical perspective. That's life, that's not a big deal. What was more important is I said, your contract is for like 160 hours this month. You will not go over 160 hours because you can't provide quality if you are burned out and just trying to work more because there's always more work. You can, so, and they say, well, I'm going to just do a little extra and I won't charge for that. And I would say that is not allowed. I appreciate your do-gooder mentality, but that is not putting kids first, because you need to be healthy and well for the long term to stay in the profession. And so that means drawing some limits. That's the one thing that may feel counterintuitive, but I think in our industry, they really needed to hear that message that as a boss, I don't want you to work for free. I don't want you to put in 1,000 extra hours. And it really did help.
Okay. So as a founder, as an entrepreneur, 160 hours in a month for most entrepreneurs is like, there's no way I can get everything done I've got to get done.
Oh no, I did not work 160 hours. I was the founder, owner, CEO, janitorial supplies service, so my schedule actually, because I worked around my daughter, it was crazy. And that I would like get up at 6, and I work maybe for an hour to get myself oriented for the day. And then daughter got up to get ready for school and I made sure she had breakfast, and I was just mom, which is a far harder job than anything I ever did as an entrepreneur. So raising decent humans in the world. So then she would go to school and I would work. And especially in the beginning when I was a service provider and I had to run the company. So I would typically work while she was in school as a service provider to earn the money. And then she would get home, and from like that 3 to 7 period time frame was like sacred family time for us, and making sure she was settled and had homework and dinner, and we had some routine. And then she would go to bed at 7:30 because we were strict about a bedtime. And then I had like 2 hours in our family home life that was just sort of hanging out with husband. Okay, what did you do today? And then after that, I was up till 1 or 2, working to do actual, how do I run the company, send out emails, recruit people, stay in contact, develop a brand, everything. And it was kind of total madness. And you're going through it in the moment and you're thinking like, this is crazy, but I'm so grateful to be at home with my daughter. There wasn't a huge financial payoff in the beginning, but then as you grow over time, I think the biggest mistake new entrepreneurs make, or I would say when you haven't done this a few times before, is that you get so busy in your business that you don't work on your business. Mm-hmm. And you have to, there's always more to do when you're in the business and in the trenches, and you have to be able to separate yourself. And I have a little activity I can tell you.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. So one of the things I encourage people, and I give this kind of advice all the time on my website. It's free for young entrepreneurs, SharonSoliday.com. And so my whole purpose with that site is to have people, young teens and people in their 20s, typically with business ideas, to just have somebody who's been there before, answer a question for free. There's no long-term commitment, but that's how it is. So if you want to see that, but my little tip here is make a org chart. Now, granted, an org chart, your name will likely be in every box: sales, branding, leadership, marketing, operations, insurance, whatever.
Oh yeah, but you wear all the hats. You wear all the hats.
You wear every hat in the beginning. Yeah, you wear every hat. So it's like an org chart of one. But most people just think of their own name and then think, okay, this is all the different things I do. Instead, list out all the different things you need to have done to keep the business running. And when you realize what your strengths are, you want to hold on to those in leadership. But where you really need help, where you're not your best, that's likely the next person you're going to hire. And so that will give you a guiding framework of like, okay, here's who needs to come on full time next to help me guide this. So, and it can look a lot of different ways. I hired a part-time bookkeeper for a long time, contract, I only used a few hours a month. And she was doing a great job. So I didn't have to do the bookkeeping, and I could be assured our taxes would get paid at the end of the year, that sort of thing. And we kept her for a long time until we actually hit a threshold financially where she just really couldn't keep up with our revenue. We had to move on. But one of the things I struggled with was, oh my God, all the boring minutia contracts that the operations piece of, like, well, we need to make sure we have the best cost benefit ratio of liability insurance for this. I mean, I would be like, please don't, I'm going to shoot myself if I have to do that for the rest of my life. So I ended up bringing on someone that was really good with operations, and that really set us both free. So I'm a big sales CEO, so I could focus on sales and sort of inspiration. I'm big on leading the charge, and she would make sure all the boxes were checked so we were legal. So if that makes sense. So you can figure out how to get those boxes filled and eventually take stuff off your plate, because the end goal, drum roll please, for all future entrepreneurs, your end goal is to get you out of the business entirely. You will never sell or exit your company with success if the company's dependent on you. And so that might feel like a really far out, message, but I don't think people learn that until much further down. And people's egos get wrapped up into, this is my business and this has to be done my way. So
I have a great book recommendation around the thought you just shared. Mark Tepper wrote a book called Walk Away Wealthy. I was in an airport somewhere walking down, and I saw Walk Away Wealthy on the book stand, and I thought, I'm going to go thumb through that for a second. And it was all about like the idea that you should always be building a business to sell it. Because if you do that, even if you never think you're going to sell it or don't want to sell it or want to pass it on to your kids, if you build it to sell it, you'll have the most freedom and you'll have the most successful business. And one of the things he suggests is taking a 2-week vacation, a mandatory 2-week straight vacation from your business, so that a long enough window of time that you get to see the places where when you're gone, things don't work anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
That way, when you come back, you go work to solve for that problem of not having put enough empowerment in your team to get things done when you're not around.
Absolutely.
Because a good business to sell is one where when you're not there, it still goes on without you.
Absolutely. You want to work yourself out of a job, and really I could have opted. By the time I sold my company, I was several years into sort of checking in on it. Now I would we had an internal website communication system. And so I would write these like, you guys are amazing. Here's you're doing so great today. But honestly, they really just let me do that, is how I like to joke about it, because if I never wrote one, they would still be getting inspiration from other places. And they would, that was all baked into the pie. They just sort of gave me a place like, okay, this will be Sharon's thing, and let her do that. And I remember the first time I had the operations person tell me, you have to stop coming to executive meetings. And that was hard. I was like, what? Yeah. And she said, you don't understand, Sharon. She goes, you carry more authority than you recognize. And you come into a room and you're listening, and then you just throw an idea out or two. And in your mind, she goes, I've worked with you long enough. I know that's just another idea. You're not wrapped into it. But once you say it, it's like all they can think about. Yeah. And so the rest of the team pivots to like what you've said. And that may not be our best choice. And I said, well, that's not what I want. And she goes, you just can't come. And I was shocked. I was like, okay, that was a bit of an ego punch. And it should have been a good way, but I was like, I liked hanging out with all you smart people doing great things with my ideas. But I stopped attending.
Well, good for you being willing to stay humble and do that. So I want to go back to the beginning days, because it sounds like you were able to create good high demand fast. You had to go sell initially. You're reaching out to school districts saying, hey, I've got speech pathologists that are amazing. But at some point it switches and districts are calling you and saying, hey, do you have anyone available, right? And that's a good place to get, where there's good high demand and the word of mouth starts to happen because you're delivering well.
Yeah.
Get there.
Oh my gosh. I always considered my frontline people our frontline salespeople. And I would tell them directly, you're the service provider and you think you have nothing to do with sales, but you have everything to do with sales, because if they're pleased with your service, then they're going to want to renew our contract. And just getting people to renew I didn't have to start from scratch every year. That meant, okay, 90% of people are going to still go back to what they did the year before. So really my sales lift is only, the amount I want to grow for this next year. 12% was typically our annual target. And so we found ways in different environments on how to look different than our competition. And it's the personal touch. It's the fact that, and you really have to kind of know who. One administrator we worked with was very receptive to, feedback where we could give him, this is how many kids we dismissed. This is how many kids got help. This is how many families that didn't complain to you because we're doing a good job. Yeah. And, creating those kind of metrics, but no other company tells their staff to report that to the higher ups, because really my typical frontline staff don't have any contact with those upper folks. And they could either reach out directly, or if they weren't comfortable, they could share it with our team, the leadership team, and our leadership team would pass it along. And so that is how we kept people in place and we kept our renewals high. And simultaneously, part of not only my service providers, they were also people I had to keep happy. So I was always checking in with them to say, is this job what you want it to look like? You can change your mind at any time if you want to serve a different population or a different age group, or I'll go out and find that for you. You don't have to take the first job I recommend, versus our competitors would just slot people into different jobs and you would just be told, here's who you're going to work with. We tried to make it the right fit, and we tried to explain to the administrator how the benefits of that continuity of service over time.
Okay, so you're doing things a little different. You're making something unique here out of service-based, where it's like, hey, a speech pathologist is a speech pathologist, yada, yada, yada. It's all the same. In the mind of the buyer, right, the principal's probably not overly concerned too much about the details of how they're going to do the work, right?
Right.
But you found ways to differentiate there. I like that. Service-based businesses are tough businesses on one hand, because as you grow, your expenses always grow with it, right? Right. And that then affects multiples. And you eventually sold your business. So I want to talk about that. Tell me, how do they value? What did they come to as far as a valuation for your business? You don't need to tell me the numbers if you don't want to share those, but how did they come up with a multiple on EBITDA?
Everybody came up with a valuation in all the ways you read about it. It was on EBITDA, then it was a valuation based on gross revenue, then it was a valuation based on, taking into consideration our renewal factors. And then of course, every party involved wants to use the valuation that's in their best interest.
Absolutely. But so it sounds like you must have had a lot of buyers.
We actually did. When we put out and the way it worked, if you want to know that, like when I worked with a broker, I interviewed 3 different brokers. They all had experience selling my type of company. And one was really dismissive of me. And I said, okay, well, I'm not going to work with you. I felt like I would have been one of 6,000 businesses he was focused on in the moment. So I didn't want that. The next one had no women represented in their company. I mean, they pointed out a couple of secretaries when I asked, do you have any women that work in your company? And honestly, I think women bring a different perspective to the table. So it's not that I had to work with a woman. It was like, I wanted a diverse range of thought. And then finally the third company that I found they were great. They had just a lot of individual attention and a lot of different perspectives on the very small team they had. So that was great. Then they put out like a 1-page anonymous, I have this company that's looking to sell. People that are interested, contact them, and they say, okay, we're interested. We'll sign an NDA so we can get the details on who this company is. And then the folks that sign the NDA then get a full deck that you've put together with your broker's assistants, kind of outlining the strengths of your company and what you feel the valuation is. And really, you don't even put that on there because you want everybody to come up with their own. And people that are in the industry know like how, and the broker was good because he said every business that claims they serve autism, this was at the time I was selling, is selling for crazy multiples right now. So if you could, but they have been in the past, but that we're seeing that trend kind of die. So don't frame it. We don't want to frame it like that. Even though you serve a lot of autism, we want to highlight this, which will increase your multiples. So you want to work with someone who knows that kind of stuff. And you're like, okay, I got it. Because really, they will frame your business differently depending on who you're working with. And that was very helpful. So in the end, we had like 75 to, and then the people, I apologize, I didn't get to the end. So after people read that deck, they then submit a letter of interest that kind of, and that includes a number, like what they're working out. Then you sort of whittle that crowd down to 5 that in those 5 are vetted for really, do they have the capacity to really come up with the money, and you go through that. And then you go through this song and dance of meeting each other. And it's the weirdest courtship in the world. And then you make a decision based on these 5, like they make a decision to make a final offer. And you then decide which one you want to pick. So it's pretty nutty. But it withered down. We had probably 75 sign an NDA wanting to check things out, 15 that made an offer, and then 5 that we opted to consider. And that easily narrowed to 3. And then between those 3, I chose, and ironically, here's a side note, there was one company in particular that I had just absolutely did not want to sell to because I knew exactly what would happen. I didn't like their business practices. I didn't like how they would treat people. I knew they would just sort of strip it down for parts. And I didn't feel right about that. And I wanted to kick him out immediately, like tell him I'm not even interested. And my broker said, nope. He goes, because I guarantee you the way this works, they'll come in with the highest offer and you want to have them in the pool. So the person you do want to sell to, you can go back to and say, I have this other offer. And I said, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's exactly what we ended up doing. And the second party said, we'll meet it. So hooray.
That you guys pay attention. If you are looking to sell your business, you want to work with a representative, a broker to help you. You may, or an investment banker, they're often called. These folks, you can find ones specific to your industry. They know the buyers in your industry. They will bring multiple buyers to the table. It will help you get the most value for your business. So highly recommend that. That is one of those things that I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't consider until too little too late, because what buyers that are going to come along want you without thinking twice about the fact that there's other buyers that also might be willing to value your business even higher than them. So good insight there. I think an important part of entrepreneurship, if you know the end from the beginning, you then can go design and build your business for that good ending. And you don't have to be so worried about the ending that you're not serious about doing good work to get there. And you have to always go into it knowing that it may not work out, that you may not be able to sell or get the value you hope for someday. But if you think about it, then you start to make better decisions along the way to get you there. So Sharon, that's great advice. You mentioned a website, SharonSoliday.com. Sounds like you enjoy helping entrepreneurs with things like this. Tell me about the book that you've written.
So I retired after I sold the company 2 years ago, and I've had a passion about personal finance forever. I'm the mom who was driving around and with the kids in the car and saying, okay, everybody, how do you think that business makes money? How would you open a checking account at that bank? I was always talking about personal finance, and really over time realized I was in the minority, and there's so much we need young people to understand, all young people, not just entrepreneurs, but also entrepreneurs from an early age. So you can start thinking about business. That's the driving force of our wonderful nation. And so we want to nurture that early. So I have this unique knowledge in child development and this passion in personal finance that I decided to overlap the two. So my book, Cradle to Credit, Money Lessons Birth to 18, really talks about, based on child development, what you should be talking to kids about every single year, so that when they're 18, they're still not planning on living at home with you. And maybe that's okay short term if they're going to college or getting their first job or something, but that there's a plan for them to launch. They need to go, versus sort of waking up one day and being shocked that they're going to have to pay for health insurance, or have to file their own taxes. And how do you buy a new car? Right now on my website, I have the 15-year-old chapter as a free download, and it's how to buy a car and understand insurance. And I talk about not only the details, but very user-friendly information descriptions. So, and then there's family activities or kid activities, if you want to just pass it over to them, that they can do to have a better understanding of it.
Awesome. That's awesome. Go check that out, folks, at SharonSoliday.com. Let's switch gears for a minute. One of the things that I like to talk about, you mentioned earlier your siblings and helping your sibling with speech pathology needs that they had. How many kids in your family that you raised? How many siblings did you have, and where did you fall in that mix? I think that's a part of the early development of an entrepreneur.
That is hands down. I'm the oldest of 5, and I am quintessential oldest child. I am the bossy one. I'm the one who will impose rules. I'm the one who wants everybody to end up doing well. And I was often sort of hassled by my family, like, Sharon, you're not parent number 3, until they needed me to be parent number 3, for the record. But I still, even now, because there's 14 years between me and the youngest. And so that's why I was old enough to drive, to take him, and other kids to whatever they needed to attend. And now I have a sense of responsibility to them. And we grew up as I describe it as a very modest income family. We were on the free and reduced lunch program, and my dad worked for the railroad. It was a lot of work ethic and value imposed on us. But really, the hustle was, if you want some extra money, go make it. Like, you're not getting it here. And so really had, my dad raised me on Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And so I took it to heart much more than any of my other siblings, but it provided some fascinating, and I think took the rough material I was as a salesperson and sort of shaped me into that. So that was a great experience. And it was also the best day of my entire life, besides the wonderful personal family experiences I've had. But after I sold the company and the cash came to the bank, I turned around and I just wrote a check and wired $100,000 to each of my siblings and said, no strings attached. You'll know what you need in your own family.
No way.
It gives me jumps. I mean, that was a lot of money. I mean, I had never seen that kind of money, just to be able to give it away to them. And and then I set up college funds for my nieces and nephews, which was nice, but and still very rewarding. And now they're like captivated to me, because I send all of them this quarterly letter I write on financial information they have to keep up on. But, that kind of day where I got to give away so much wealth was the best day I've had since I sold the company.
Oh, that's so cool. That is so awesome. I've never heard a story like that, by the way. And I would love to talk to you offline later about gifting and how that worked out. So cool. Well, Sharon, a super big pleasure to be with you today. If I were to ask you one last question, what it would be is, if you had one piece of advice for a budding entrepreneur, what would it be?
The world is filled with all sorts of people, including those who love and support you in other arenas, who will tell you you're insane and that you're nuts and that this idea has no merit. And they might be right, because you're probably someone who has lots of ideas, but really they're most often wrong, because an entrepreneur, I used to describe it to people as because I've had other little businesses, and when I know this is just waiting to be built, like you feel that inherently inside you. And if you really believe in something, you have to go for it. And if you're younger, like I'm thinking teens and 20s, the exciting moment about that is that you often don't have kids, you don't have big mortgages, you don't have all this stuff that will make you afraid in the future. Yeah. And if you come from a modest, mean background, you have been gifted with an opportunity, because the people I meet who are afraid tend to be very comfortable middle-class folks. And when you don't have a lot and you've gotten a little bit now, you're not as freaked out about losing it, because you can go get it again.
Yeah.
And so really trust yourself and take a leap. My metric was, if I got to 85 years old and didn't do X, am I going to look back and say, dang, I should have totally taken the chance and done that? And I don't think enough people take the risk and really write out, how do I do that, and make a plan and get some help and try and, give it a shot.
There you have it,
the naysayers. That's the short version.
Don't listen to the TLDR is don't listen to the naysayers. I love it. Sharon, thank you so much for sharing today. What you've shared will bless the lives of so many budding entrepreneurs as they listen in. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, folks, go check out SharonSoliday.com and make it a great day.
Thanks for joining me on Startups with Stu. We have big goals to help millions of entrepreneurs. If you enjoyed this show, please take a minute to share it with someone else that needs to hear it, or leave a review. Remember, success is within reach for those who dare to dream big and take action. Until next time, keep pushing forward on your entrepreneurial journey.